of a cop-out or something like that. We really have to understand that we do have a choice, but we can choose to close down in fear and succumb to the forces of limitation that seek to keep us limited, keep us stuck to our egos, or we can open up in trust and respect for what is possible.
For me, part of the essential, kind of shift in consciousness that we may be undergoing is this kind of integration of empirical, rational, scientific thought and intuitive, shamanic, and mystical knowledge systems. And for me, it's really as those two aspects come together, this next level of human consciousness is beginning to be formed and to sort of recognize itself. And that's actually what I see the archetype of Quetzalcoatl also kind of indicating or representing as an archetype. It's the meaning of bird and snake, the feathered serpent. So it's the meaning of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, or it could be seen as the meaning of the materialist, empirical thrust of Western culture with the esoteric and mystical framework of indigenous cultures and Eastern cultures. So for me, like, one thing that's really important that's been happening lately in the last 50 years has been the integration of Eastern metaphysical thought into the Western psyche. So like everywhere you go, like every airplane, people are reading Thich Nhat Hanh, the Dalai Lama, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I mean, that's Vedanta philosophy re-expressed for the European Western mindset. So people still sort of tend to think of spirituality as a trend in a way, but I don't like the word spirituality very much. But I think it's much closer to being a profound and transformative shift in our psyche. So now I think there's a second stage in that initiatory process going on for the Western psyche, but it's happening on a much more foundational level.
The Egyptians were able to work with crystals, which we see in rare but occasional figurines, but never has a magnifying glass been found, and the level of magnification is considerable in order to know in order to be able to physically see a sperm cell. It's thought by the academics that they may have used a cow's eye, the lens of a cow's eye, for certain orders of magnification, but again, it's hard to imagine that could be used to view the physical sperm cell, so this remains actually rather more of a mystery than people like to acknowledge.
The Temple of Luxor is in every respect the living image of man. Like man, it began from a seed containing the overall plan for what it would ultimately become. It grew in time in accordance with the geometry of life, and we can see that the stages of the temple's growth correspond very closely with the 4 stages of human growth that are governed by the pituitary gland. Was this a functional necessity for the temple to perform its task? On Schwaller's plan, this hall corresponds to the eyes and optical center, where the nerves cross, and the right brain receives what the left eye sees, and the left brain receives what the right eye sees. The hall is dominated by 12 columns.
This is known as the Hall of 12 Columns, which represents symbolically the 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. It's interesting to note that the optic nerve consists of 12 bundles of nerves. This is the center of vision as it relates to consciousness.
Above the optical center of the temple, in what would correspond to the higher glands of the brain, we find a set of 3 interlocking sanctuaries. The solid stone walls between the 3 chambers hold one of the most amazing surprises to be found at Luxor. The expansive imagery carved into each side of separating walls can only be understood by combining the images carved on the other side of the same wall. The images interlock, enhance, and complete each other. It is as if a single image or idea was etched partially on one side of a thick sheet of glass and partially on the opposite side. The wall itself connects and synthesizes them. It is as if the walls depict a sacred thought being transmitted through the brain. This triple sanctuary is home to the pineal gland, or third eye. The enigmatic cobra rising from the third eye of the pharaoh is so prevalent that it is almost synonymous with Egyptian art. What did it mean? The central aspect of the pharaohs was that they were humankind perfected and elevated to a divine plane. The cobra over the pineal gland area served as the perfect insignia for their status, but also connects to a concept found in countless cultures. It echoes and amplifies the similar concepts at the heart of Hindu and Asian sacred teachings. The transformation into a higher spiritual manifestation is symbolized by the Hindus as a Kundalini snake. It represents life energy, redirected and refined for the creation of a higher spiritual presence. Similarly, throughout tantric, alchemical, and modern magical disciplines, it is an indicator of the universal pursuit of higher consciousness.
A curious note concerning the Uraeus serpent, the cobra that appears over the forehead of the pharaoh's headpiece and such. While obviously a symbol of the activation of the Ajna chakra, the third eye chakra, in the psychic system of mankind, it also points to a secret form of worship open only to initiates. So while the populace, while the masses worshipped the bull of Taurus, and this was during the astrological age of Taurus, they publicly worshipped the bull, the priests, the kings, secretly worshipped the snake of Scorpio, which is on the opposite pole, directly opposite in the zodiac from Taurus.
This ancient and secret science, called Kundalini in some cultures, is universally represented by and symbolically associated with the snake. This arcane and magical science seems to have occupied a position of great importance in the minds of the Egyptian elite. In every culture, the symbolism of the snake is deeply rooted in magic, in forbidden knowledge, and in the pursuit of higher states of consciousness. In this relief from the tomb of Seti III, we see not only the snake symbolism, but we see the rising sun, itself a symbol of the dawn of a higher consciousness, cresting 2 intertwined serpents. What makes this relief even more interesting is when we overlay the same template provided by Luxor Temple. The symbolism of this relief becomes clear. We see so many correlations it seems incontrovertible that these 2 images are linked in some way. This ancient and secret science, symbolized by the snake and associated with rising light and higher consciousness, seems to have been of central importance to the magical operations employed to gain mastery over the transition into the afterlife.